For the past 10 years, the Coalition for Accountability and Integrity Aman has been developing its report on integrity and combating corruption. The report takes stock of the achievements made and reviews the challenges that still lie ahead of immunizing the environment of integrity and combating corruption in Palestine. Monitored from multiple sources, relevant information and variables are analyzed by the report team with a view to presenting findings and recommendations to stakeholders. According to the report on integrity and combating corruption, 2017 marked a negative environment that continued to affect structures and functions of the Palestinian National Authority, PNA, and heightened challenges to consolidating the national integrity system, NIS. The Israeli occupation and its aggressive policies continued unabated. Combined with a disrupted national reconciliation effort, the internal Palestinian political divide continued to reflect on Palestinian citizen lives. The situation was further compounded by an ongoing policy of reduced international funding and aid to the PNA. The roles of the Palestinian Legislative Council, PLC, and Judicial Authority declined further. Control of and accountability for public finance management and public administration deteriorated. Sector strategies and the national policy agenda announced by the government were implemented reluctantly and at a rather slow pace. Adopting an inward-looking approach, the government inadequately involved civil society organizations, reflecting a hesitant political will to combat corruption. These and other conditions have led to a further deterioration in citizens' economic situation, particularly in the Gaza Strip. The end result was the prevalence of corruption in food supplies, medicine, and competition for jobs. Positive indicators. In spite of a continued unfavorable environment for combating corruption, 2017 saw some positive practices. For example, the government released the 2017-2022 National Policy Agenda, putting citizens first as an official document, which emphasizes the promotion accountability and transparency in rationalizing public finance management and public administration. The accountability system marked improvement in some aspects. Most notably, although Hamas disrupted them in the Gaza Strip, local elections were held in the West Bank. In Gaza, the public prosecution published the procedure manual for the complaint department staff to regulate the receipt of complaints from the public. The NIS also saw some improvement. The General Personnel Council, GPC, developed the 2017-2022 National Strategic Plan of Civil Service, finalized job description cards of a number of public positions, and identified sensitive positions which required a constant job rotation. In regard of the principles of transparency, some government websites show improvement, presenting more transparent content, access to information, and public service delivery. It appeared that most line ministries in the West Bank and Gaza had accessible websites in Arabic. Improvements seen in public finance management included launch of the Unified Portal for Social Assistance. Avoiding duplicity, the portal aims at distributing assistance to a maximum number of needy and poor households. Challenges. Notwithstanding the improvement in some practices and processes, numerous challenges continued to embed a fully operational NIS. Some challenges were an extension from previous years. For example, the Comprehensive National Plan for Combating Corruption and Detailed Rationalization and Austerity Plan have not been adopted. In addition to local elections in Gaza, presidential and legislative elections have not been held in both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Continued inaction of the PLC has been compounded by a declining role of the judicial authority. Although the President had passed a decree on establishment of the National Committee for Enhancement of the Justice Sector, a key challenge to the judiciary and legislative sectors still lied in an incomplete reforms. Besides continued disorder, laws by decrees were hastily enacted in the absence of the PLC. These were partly passed in the context of the Fatah-Hamas political rivalries or by reason of personal interest interference by certain executive officials. Formal regulations and practices also restricted and curbed the media role in the accountability process. Deficient accountability system manifested in the lack of complaints unit. Towards the end of 2017, complaint handling mechanisms were not developed on websites of the Ministry of Finance and Planning, MOFB, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates. Additionally, the MOFB did not publish periodic financial reports. In particular, the Ministry did not provide the final account of the 2014 and 2015 general budgets, negatively reflecting on effective accountability for actual expenditures and obstructing validation of compliance with operative budget laws. Senior appointments continued to lack transparency and fair competition, neglecting the principle of equal opportunities. Employment vacancies were not advertised in newspapers. Recruitment competitions were not held and job description cards were not finalized. Appointments were not overseen by independent official bodies in both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Continued failure to set employment grades and determine the salaries of honoraria of chairs of non-ministerial government bodies resulted in a widening wage gap. Some chairs' salaries and honoraria were higher than those earned by the President of the State of Palestine. Placed on the public payroll, the phenomena of staff appointed to serve Palestinian factions, national figures, or non-governmental organizations or societies continued to exist. In a context of inadequate integrity and transparency in the civil service, some fixed-term contract staff enjoyed privileged and high salaries in violation of the contract law. These payments were incommensurate to the average wage bill in Palestine. The 2017 report on integrity and combating corruption also provides a detailed account of continuing weakness and non-compliance with the principles of transparency. This is triggered by a weak political will to openness to society. For example, the Prime Minister's office refused to sign the Transparency Pledge developed by the Coalition of International Non-Governmental Organizations. The pledge stresses the need that the government be transparent in the periodic review of compliance with the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC. The civil society will also be engaged in the review process. A key challenge to the principles of transparency was posed by failure to pass the law on the right of access to information and National Archive law. Access to public agreements signed on behalf of Palestinians continued to be denied. Some information and decisions were blocked or not published timely. For instance, since April 2017, the Council of Ministers has stopped publishing decisions on its website. The limited scope of public information posted on the websites of particular government bodies resulted in a clear failure to provide access to information about public service delivery. This includes the Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs, which does not have a website. In the Gaza Strip, the majority of line ministers did not publish annual reports and strategic plans. The State Audit and Administrative Bureau, SAACB, did not release any audit reports on the final account or any other annual control reports. The Gaza-based de facto government fears that such publications be used in the context of political rivalries. In relation to public finance management, hesitant implementation of rationalization and austerity plans and policies resulted in public expenditures, which did not fit with the priorities of people under occupation. Along this vein, new government buildings continued to be rented, purchased, and constructed. The Presidential Guest Palace was built and converted into a public library. Salaries and increments were paid to the staff of an airline company, which did not actually exist. In the Gaza Strip, several practices reflected poor public finance management. In this context, state land in the Tel Sakan archaeological area were allocated as compensations of civil servants. Public funds were also wasted at the coastal municipality water utility. The rationalization plan was challenged by an ineffective security sector structure, continuing resistance to job rotation and transfer of surplus security personnel to other agencies. Problems were also associated with the operations delivered by the Central Military Financial Department. In regard of corruption cases, towards the 6th of December 2017, the Palestinian Anti-Corruption Commission (PACC) received a total of 430 communications and complaints. Of these, the anti-corruption prosecution followed up with 38 cases, or 9% of all cases fell to the PACC. The anti-corruption prosecution remitted 21 cases to the Corruption Crimes Court, which disposed 42 pending cases from previous years. The 2017 report on integrity and combating corruption monitored corruption cases throughout 2017. These included customs exemptions granted to executive officials in contrariety with the law and as a form of nepotism for close political confidence. A formal complaint was lodged to the Attorney General on suspicions of financial and administrative corruption, which involved the sale of land belonging to the Greek Orthodox Church. Widespread corruption practices also continued to be reported on the Gaza crossings. In addition to a suspicion of corruption at the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, misappropriation cases were reported to have taken place at civil society organizations. Economic crimes continued to be committed across the West Bank and Gaza Strip. On a daily basis, the Ministry of National Economy and Customs Police announced the seizure of products unfit for human consumption. This unveiled ineffective control due to the lack of a concerted effort and a single agency that is authorized to control these products. For the most part, penal decisions do not deter persons who commit these violations and crimes. Food items and names of offenders are not published to allow community sanctions. The 2017 report on integrity and combating corruption highlighted particular issues that merit immediate attention, including weak oversight of and accountability for public services delivered by the private sector, such as the inadequate roles of the Palestinian Electricity Regulatory Council and Water Sector Regulatory Council. Also, the Telecommunications Regulatory Commission has not been established. The Higher Council for Public Procurement Policies is not empowered to control and scrutinize all public works and procurement tenders. Disrupted approval of the health insurance system and inadequate accountability for medical malpractice, leading to the collapse of the Palestinian health insurance system and affecting public health budget allocations. Ineffective security sector structure, including a large number of officers, negatively impacting security agencies' capacity to perform assigned duties. Soldiers and low-ranking officers are the backbone of security operations and duties. The increasing number of officers places a burden on the general budget and leads to an inflating security sector wage bill. In light of the foregoing challenges and finding of the 2017 Report of Integrity and Combating Corruption, Aman provides recommendations on different levels. On the level of promoting integrity of governance, demand that all political parties in the West Bank and Gaza Strip expedite the effort to put an end to the internal Palestinian political divide, facilitate the work of the national consensus government in Gaza, and resolve the pending staffing problem. Demand that the President and government restore and reinvigorate the legislative authority, hold presidential and legislative elections as soon as possible, and call on all parties to organize local elections in the Gaza Strip. Demand that the President approve a transitional plan to reform the justice sector and consolidate the judicial system. Demand that the government adopt a comprehensive national plan to rationalize public expenditures. This will include reallocating security sector resources, addressing the imbalance between high and low-ranking officers, and developing and approving an inclusive and compulsory health insurance system in place of the current voluntary arrangement. Demand that the Council of Ministers approve job descriptions for higher and special categories. Demand that the Council of Ministers implement measures to ensure serious compliance with the Code of Conduct and Ethics of Public Service. On the level of promoting transparent public finance management, demand that the government investigate non-transparent financial operations with Israel, which manipulates Palestinian finance. Also demand that all agreements signed by the government on behalf of Palestinians, particularly those awarding monopoly franchises, be published. Demand that all government bodies compile, publish and allow public access to respective reports timely and without delay. Demand that the Council of Ministers finalize and approve the law on the right of access to information. On the level of promoting accountability for public administration, demand that the government consult with stakeholders to draft franchise, competition and anti-monopoly laws which make clear and ensure a competitive approach to the public service privatization process. Demand that the Council of Ministers establish and empower regulatory and oversight boards to follow up on public services delivered by the private sector. Demand that the Council of Ministers approve financial and administrative regulations for non-ministerial government bodies. Demand that the President and government amend the anti-corruption law providing for the obligatory periodic publication of financial disclosure. Assist declarations of the PNA President, ministers, PLC members, and senior state officials in the Palestinian Official Gazette. Demand that the Council of Ministers review the privileges granted to higher category staff of the PA institutions, which are a main cause of the widening wage gap. On the level of anti-corruption efforts, demand that the government adopt and approve the comprehensive national cross-cutting plan for integrity and combating corruption. Reply to observations of the Palestine Implementation Review Group of the UNCAC. The government should introduce required amendments to enhance existing anti-corruption measures and align Palestinian regulations with the UNCAC. Demand that the Council of Ministers pass the regulation provided for by the anti-corruption law to protect reporting persons against counterclaims and retaliatory and malicious actions. Demand that the Council of Ministers develop a regulation or bylaw to govern ministers, PLC members, and tax and customs officers who move to the private sector.